Qatar is the richest country in the world, with a per capita income of approximately $125,000. It has a well-developed oil exploration industry where the petroleum industry accounts for 70% of its government revenue, 60% of its GDP, and 85% of its export earnings. Although the size of Qatar's GDP is barely within the top 50th largest in the world, the country's relatively low population of 2.5 million results in a large GDP per capita. I'm Kasim, this is KJ Vids, and in this video we will look at why everyone does not enjoy the fruit of Qatar's wealth. Lots of countries have fossil fuels, but few have done as well as Qatar to take advantage of them. Qatar has done much to reinvest energy money and diversify its economy. Support from the US as well as decades of proven reserves have also fostered stability. Qatar has been ruled by the Al Thani family since the early 1900s when it became a British protectorate. On July 17, 1913, Sheikh Abdullah bin Qasim Al Thani became the ruler of Qatar. At the time, Qatar's primary industry was pearling and fishing. The country was marked by widespread poverty, malnutrition and disease from the collapse of the pearl trade in the 1920s. But in 1939, oil was discovered at Dukhan. Development on the field was slow until 1949 because of World War II. But while the oil discovery was significant, it was nothing compared to the natural gas reserves found 30 years later. In 1951, Qatar produced 46,500 barrels of oil per day, amounting to $4.2 million in revenue. The discovery of offshore oil fields and their development by Shell led to an increase in Qatar's production to 233,000 barrels per day. New revenue from oil exports flooded the pockets of the ruling family, and Qatar began a slow process of modernization. The country's first school, hospital, power plant, desalination plant and telephone exchange all opened in the 1950s. Oil revenue steadily increased through the 1960s as the Al Thani family strengthened its grip on power by installing relatives in high government positions. All Al Thani family members were granted extravagant allowances. In 1971, the world's largest natural gas field, the South North Dome Gas Condensate Field, was discovered off the coast of Qatar. Petroleum production was still running high at the time, so the field was not developed. Thanks to the North Field, Qatar has the largest natural gas reserves in the world after Russia and Iran. Their reserves are estimated to be 896 trillion cubic feet. The crash of oil prices in the 1980s, along with the Emir siphoning off oil revenues, stalled the Qatari economy. The crisis led Qatar to finally develop the North Field in 1989, though even then the production was slow. By 1995, the situation in Qatar had not improved. Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani took the throne in a bloodless coup from Emir Khalifa bin Hamad, while the Emir was in Switzerland. Sheikh Hamad set a whole new direction for the country. One of Sheikh Hamad's first moves was to fast-track the development of the North Dome field. Production was ramped up and Qatar began exporting liquid natural gas for the first time. To accommodate increased production and demand, Qatar began building new liquid natural gas plants. Over the last 15 years, 14 liquid natural gas plants have been built in partnership with international oil companies. In the late 1990s, Qatar entered into production sharing agreements with numerous international oil companies. The new companies began using horizontal drilling methods to reverse decline in oil production. Qatar's partnership with Maersk Oil resulted in the world's longest horizontal well. In 1996, Qatar built the gigantic billion-dollar Al Udeid Air Base, which has served as logistics and a command facility for the US military. The partnership with the US military has given Qatar unprecedented levels of security. In 1997, Qatar began long-term agreements to provide massive amounts of natural gas to Spain and Japan. Over time, Qatar further diversified its clients. Thanks to steady oil production and high natural gas production, Qatar's GDP has skyrocketed over the last 15 years. Hoping to avoid the dreaded resource curse, Qatar has taken measures to diversify its economy. In 1998, the government built Education City, a massive campus that supports 6 American and 2 European universities, as well as research centres and think tanks. Qatar has amassed a sovereign wealth fund of over $300 billion thanks to revenues from oil and natural gas. It then began to invest it like a hedge fund. In 2003, Qatar established the Qatar Investment Authority to recycle oil and gas income into other income streams. QIA has made big investments in Barclays Bank, Credit Suisse, Harrods, Porsche, Volkswagen, and a majority stake in the Paris Saint-Germain football team. Qatar has become one of the largest holders of real estate in London through the QIA. Qatar owns the Shard, Western Europe's largest skyscraper, as well as large parts of Canary Wharf and other parts of the city. The Qatar Financial Centre was built in 2005 to develop Qatar's financial services industry. The country believes that it can become a financial services leader for Gulf states thanks to its relative stability and large base of capital. In 2006, Qatar passed Indonesia to become the largest exporter of liquid natural gas in the world, with revenues from oil and natural gas amounting to 60% of Qatar's GDP. But more competition was coming, with liquid natural gas production booming in places like the US and Australia. In December 2010, Qatar was selected as host for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. Qatar has positioned itself as a sporting hub for the region, hosting and planning to host numerous global sporting events. There have been widespread allegations of horrific working and living conditions for the migrant workers who are building the World Cup sites and other projects. It was also alleged that Qatar spent $5 million on bribes to secure the 2022 World Cup bid. But although Qatar is the richest country per capita income, this does not always paint a realistic picture of life in Qatar. The main reason it is the richest per capita is because the data is only typically based on the incomes of native Qatari citizens, a demographic of Qatari society whose population is estimated to be about 250,000. In 2015, there was an estimated 1.7 million migrants working in Qatar, and in January 2017, this number increased to as many as 2.2 million. The overall population today is approximately 2.5 million. The cause for this increase in population is mostly due to migrant workers, who now comprise around 90% of the country's population and workforce. Though it may be news to some, the Qatar poverty rate is only becoming increasingly worse each day, and migrant workers are amongst the sole individuals suffering from it. Most migrant workers in Qatar come from countries like Bangladesh, India, Nepal or Pakistan in efforts to escape poverty in their home countries and achieve financial stability for themselves and their families. Unfortunately, as many have quickly discovered, Qatar is not all what they anticipated. Upon arrival into the country, Qatari law dictates that migrant workers under the kafala sponsorship system cannot leave the country or change jobs without their employer's permission. Another major problem is that employers in Qatar are also notorious for confiscating the passports of migrant workers, keeping them in the country indefinitely and leading to many allegations of forced labour. While the salaries of migrant workers in Qatar vary on a case-by-case basis, the lowest paid migrant worker will on average earn about $1,920 per year working in construction. The higher earning workers generally don't receive a salary exceeding $500 per month. In contrast, salary estimates for Qatari citizens average $690,000 of the GDP per citizen, a fact that reinforces the notion that the majority of the country's wealth is concentrated in the hands of native Qatari citizens. Another thing to take into consideration is that although they may be receiving a salary, for a large number of these workers, the majority of their wages will go to paying off recruitment loans, the loans they took to get into Qatar in the first place, as well as the accrued interest. Migrant workers are rarely given an opportunity to spend much money on themselves or to send money home to their families for a minimum number of months after arriving into the country. Also, since they have no freedom of movement or ability to change places or work freely, they only increase the Qatar poverty rate by being forced to continue to work in lower paid jobs, while simultaneously being consistently limited in how they can spend the money they earn. Much like other countries, a wealth gap has inevitably led to a potentially irreversible Qatari poverty rate, so long as this disproportionate distribution of wealth continues to occur. Similar to any wealthy countries in the West, there are also ripple effects produced by poverty. In Qatar, migrant workers have alleged complaints that include substandard living conditions, ill treatment in labour camps, lies about the details of the work they would be doing and how long until they actually arrive in Qatar, health problems with no money to afford healthcare, constant fears of being homeless, poor safety conditions in the workplace, and much more. In 2017, the United Nations International Labour Organization gave Qatar until November 2017 to end human rights abuses towards their migrant workers or face investigation for forced labour violations. Qatar serves as another reminder that the production of wealth does not automatically equate to a fairer society where everyone can benefit from the country's wealth. This is important to observe, since as long as emerging economies such as Pakistan and Turkey focus only on the creation of wealth rather than the distribution of wealth, they will inevitably face the same problems. I'm Kasim, thank you for watching and see you next time. We would love to hear your views on the situation in the comments below. If you would like to see more videos like this, please help us by supporting our crowdfunding campaign on fundmypage.com/KJVids.